We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine Podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis, James Fegan, and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome to the Sox Machine Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and it's Monday, February 12th, 2024, as we bring you a new episode. This show was recorded before the Super Bowl, which was a smart idea on my part because I'm a 49ers fan. So if the 49ers won, I'm in a great mood. If the 49ers lost, well, it's baseball season. Prospect Week continues through the weekend at SoxMachine.com as we are leading up to spring training. Our new beat reporter, James Fegan, is on his way down to Arizona to help us get insight into the White Sox camp like we've never had before, but to always provide insight on the White Sox top prospects. And let's look ahead to the 2024 MLB Draft as college baseball has their opening day on Friday. Is one of our best friends of the show from MLB.com, it's Jim Callis. And Jim, thanks for joining the Sox Machine Podcast again.
Thanks, Josh. One of my favorite podcasts. I'm not sure. Where do I rank on all-time appearances as guest? Do we know?
I think you are now number one. It's between you and Dan Zaborski at Fangraphs.
Okay. Because it's like I always enjoy it, and I just want to congratulate you and Sox Machine adding James. Great move.
Yeah, we're very excited, and I think when looking at the White Sox farm system, the comments that we're seeing at Sox Machine, the beginning part of the prospect week, I think there's more excitement about this farm system heading into this season than a year ago. So as a whole, are the White Sox getting better compared to other systems in baseball?
They are. It's not like it was after the Chris Sale trade and the Adam Eaton trade and the Jose Quintana trade, where they had one of the best farm systems in baseball. But it's funny. We did a story, I think in December. I think it's during those doldrums between Christmas and New Year's. And I didn't do the story, but it was most improved farm systems. And I pounded the table a little bit for the White Sox because the White Sox, they don't have like a top 10 farm system right now. Like I think we haven't ranked them yet, more in that 16 to 20 range, I think. And I think that's where other people have been ranking them. But they got a bunch of interesting guys out of the draft, and they continue to make trades and add prospects and add depth. I think they've gone in the last year from one of the thinner systems, like we probably bottom 5 system. I forget where we had them ranked at the beginning of last season. Like I said, they probably moved up 10 or 15 spots. So I do think there are more interesting guys. And another thing that I think too is like, so many of these guys they've acquired in the last, since July, either draft guys who only played a little bit or trade guys they got, but they only played a little bit. But even since the deadline, they've been making waiver claims and other small trades and a Rule 5 pick. So I think if you're a White Sox fan, you really haven't seen a lot of these guys in a White Sox uniform, and you've seen some of the big name acquisitions for like a month or so. So I think that kind of adds to the interest that there's so many new prospects in the system.
You can go to MLB.com, podcast listeners, and see the entire top 100. The White Sox have 2 prospects in the top 50, and that's great news for the White Sox farm system. And number 9 is Colson Montgomery. And when you ever have a top 10 prospect in your farm system in all of Major League Baseball, that is a big deal, Jim. So why do you consider Montgomery a top 10 prospect going into 2024?
Yeah, I haven't been at MLB the whole time, but MLB has ranked prospects for 20 years, going back to 2004. This is the 20th year. Colson Montgomery is the first White Sox draftee to ever crack the top 10.
What?
Like all the other top 10. Yes. Like I was like Joe over, White Sox media relations asked me like, when was the last time? And I looked and it was, the last time was never, because it's like guys like, Makata and Luis Robert and Eloy Jimenez. And I think Kopech got in there too. A little bit. And I think that was it for us. So yeah, that was pretty crazy when he asked us that. And then I went back and looked, because obviously I was at Baseball America for a long time. And so anyway, our highest, you want to guess who the highest MLB.com White Sox drafted prospect was before? Two guys tied at 14.
I'm going to say Andrew Vaughn.
Yeah, another guy.
Did he get that high?
Yep, and the other guy had the same draft position as Andrew Vaughn.
Oh, no.
Third overall pick.
Oh, why am I blanking?
Pitcher. Carlos Rodon.
Oh, yes.
But so anyway, I went back and looked, because I have Baseball America's, I was at Baseball America when we started doing top 100 prospects, I think in 1991. There were three players, all pitchers, who made the Baseball America top 10 who were White Sox draft picks. You want to guess? Can you name one of them? That goes back.
Alex Fernandez?
No, because he predated the top 100 list and was in the big leagues.
Okay. Oh,
I loved Alex Fernandez. That's a good guess. But it's 1990.
Kip Wells?
No, it's 1993, 1994, and then one guy repeated in 2000 and 2001. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
The highest drafted guy, if you're combining B and MLB, John Roush.
Okay.
Number 4 twice. He's number 4 twice. Jason Beret got up to number 8.
Yeah, my guy.
And James Baldwin got up to number 9. So anyway,
okay.
I'm dropping all the history on you. So I've forgotten your original question. Colson, what were you going to ask?
So this is a great history lesson. So Colson Montgomery is the first White Sox position player draftee since 1991 to show up in a top 10 list of the top 100 prospects in Major League Baseball. Of
Baseball America or MLB.com. Yeah, because I've overlapped. But yeah.
Wow.
Which is
okay. Yeah. So why is he top 10?
Yeah, Joe Borchard never made it. But yeah, no, it's Colson. I mean, it's funny. I almost feel like it's the cliche answer, but cliches are cliches because they're true. People have been comparing Colson Montgomery to Corey Seager since he was an amateur. 6'3", 6'4", lefty hitting, physical shortstop. Is he going to stay at the position? Well, actually, he's more athletic than he gets credit for, and he just might. And he can hit for average and hit for power, and he's got a really good approach for a young guy. I don't know. It's I feel like every time I read about Colson, I feel obliged to mention that comparison. But that's the type of guy he became. In fact, when I was at the Fall Stars game in the AFL and he was MVP, had to mention, hey, Corey Seager just won the World Series MVP award, and now here's Colson Montgomery. But no, I think jumps out the most to me is he's better than we thought he was. And when that happens with a guy who's highly touted, he's a first round pick and got paid, that's pretty impressive. But I think he's a more advanced hitter than people realized. He wasn't just this big guy, with some power. And I think, we knew he was athletic, the whole story about how he would have had the opportunity to walk on Indiana's basketball team had he gone to college. But I don't think he's necessarily going to be a Gold Glove shortstop. But I think Corey Seager, the higher he climbs, people are you know what? He might be a shortstop for a while. And I do think the long-term plan probably is for Colson Montgomery to be the shortstop and Bryan Ramos to be the third baseman for a long time. Maybe by the end of this year.
And on that topic, what do you need to see from Montgomery in 2024 to convince you that the White Sox should give him a shot in the majors?
Well, the thing is, it's interesting. I get asked a lot, You know, is he going to make the opening roster? When is he going to be up? Tim Anderson's gone. I wouldn't promote him at all. What you basically need to see from Colson, I think, is just stay healthy. He's had some minor injuries, nothing chronic or long term, that have cost him time. And so he really hasn't played that much, even in Double-A. Even with Project Birmingham 2 years ago, I think it's 60 games in Double-A, and he hasn't played Triple-A. So that was going on the fall league. Oh, can he make the opening roster? And it's well, why would he make the opening? If I'm the White Sox, and again, I mean, this is the reality of baseball. I know we have the prospect, whatever that thing is, the PPI, where you have the incentive if the guy gets full year service time and he's up at the beginning of the season, you get full year service time and he wins Rookie of the Year, you get a draft pick. I don't think he's ready. And so I certainly wouldn't promote him early enough in the season to start his free agent clock ticking. Or even the arbitration clock. I don't see what would be wrong with having Colson Montgomery spend half the season in AAA and then you make your decision. And honestly, the way to play it honestly would probably be you call him up so he gets exactly 45 days of service time. And we saw teams do this last year. The Dodgers did this with Michael Busch. The Angels did with Nolan Schanuel. But call him up, whatever you figure it out, what day does he get? No more than 45 days, because that's the max for a rookie. You make sure he doesn't get more than 130 at bats. So you let him get his feet wet. And then next year he's eligible for that, that draft pick. That's what I would do with him. But I think the main thing with him, honestly, is just staying healthy.
Yeah, I was thinking more late August, early September, giving Montgomery a shot.
You just don't let him get over 45, because it's that's the flip side. I think teams are just promoting guys, younger guys in general anyway, but now they have I still think there's time, and Colson's an example where the benefit is better to delay his free agency than try to go for this pick. But on the backside of it is, I do think you're going to see guys called up a little bit later than usual if you're in Colson's situation, where it's hey, let's just keep him right at 45. Because the Dodgers, who obviously traded Michael Busch to Cubs, sent Busch was up and down because of guys getting hurt, and they had a little lineup. But Busch was on their roster September 9th, day 45, and they sent him down for the rest of the year to keep him right at 45 just in case. So I think we'll see Colson. It'll probably be late August.
Noah Schultz is the 50th ranked prospect in Major League Baseball. We know that the stuff has looked incredible. It is a very unique body. It's 6'9", like an extreme version of Chris Sale back in the day, White Sox fans. And Jim Margulis and I have had this conversation of how many innings should we expect Schultz to throw in 2024. And I made the case that if he had gone to Vanderbilt, I imagine that he would be the Saturday starter for the Commodores as a sophomore, which would put him about 50 to 70 innings range. Is that a fair target for Schultz?
I don't know. I think he'd be their number one starter.
Okay.
Vanderbilt doesn't have the pitching they've had in the past. I mean, it's not bad, but if Noah Schultz was pitching on Saturday, I'd like to see Vanderbilt's Friday starter.
Okay.
Because he'd be pretty good. But no, I know what you're saying, because he pitched 30-something innings last year. Schultz did. I mean, if he went to Vanderbilt, maybe he plays for Team USA and gets a few innings there too. I would think it would be 80 to 100 this year.
Wow.
For Schultz, because you can't ramp him up to. I don't think you want to go from 30. And I'm sure he threw some on the side in extended spring, and they were taking it very carefully with him between the forearm strain and the shoulder impingement, which two phrases you don't really want to hear associated with your pitcher his first full year in pro ball. But no, I'm sure they'll take it easy with him to some extent. But and I'm not saying they shouldn't, but I don't know, Josh. I've come full circle. When I started, you had guys throwing 200 innings in a minor league season. You had Paul Wilson, who was the number one pick in the draft, through I think 194 innings or something in the minors in a season. I remember Kenny Baugh coming out of Rice around 2000, and he had thrown, I don't know, I'm going to get the two numbers wrong, but he threw 150 innings or close to 150 innings in Rice, and they came out and pitched 60 innings in pro ball. And so, because back then the idea was, the arm is a muscle and you build it up through working it. And then we've gone the other direction where we have all these tight pitch counts and innings limits, and we don't want to increase a guy too many innings from one season to the next. And guys are still getting hurt more than ever, which I just think speaks to nature of pitching. But I think they will be cautious with him. They're not going to have him go make 26 starts and throw 150 innings somewhere. I think it'll probably be 75 to 100 innings probably.
Yeah, I was thinking if he could make 20 starts in 2024, ranging or averaging 4 innings per appearance, that would be good for the White Sox. It'd be good for Schultz, because then you can start dreaming on him joining the major leagues pretty soon. He's still far away, White Sox fans, unless they decide to go to the Garrett Crochet route, which I do not want them to do with Noah Schultz. I just want that on record. Garrett Crochet is a trigger topic still for me, Jim. Now he wants to be a starter.
Well, that was it was going to be like Chris Sale 2.0 all along, and he just hasn't stayed healthy.
Moving over to the position side, you referenced him, Bryan Ramos. I've been hesitant on Ramos in the past. I'm convinced that Ramos has got a higher ceiling than what we've seen from Lenin Sosa and Jose Rodriguez and the other White Sox middle infielders. What are your thoughts about Ramos, and do you think he's close to being major league ready?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think he's probably in the same situation as Colson Montgomery. I mean, he's played more at AA. You get him some AAA time, maybe have him up in August. He's not the same level as prospects as Colson Montgomery. And outside 2022, like last year was a groin injury. The year in 2021, I think he had a shoulder injury, played through, but it hampered him. So he's had some nagging injuries, but he's also gotten better. He's gotten a little quicker, better defensively. I know when I first started talking about Bryan Ramos with people, it's I'm not really sure he moves well enough to stay at third. And I don't think anybody questions that. Again, I don't think he's be a Gold Glover, but I think he can play third base. He's a little aggressive, but he puts the bat on the ball. I mean, I think you could see, I don't know, a 260, 20 or so, 20, maybe 25 homer third baseman out of him. I think he's I just think he flies under the radar because outside of 2022, he's never been fully healthy. He's always been super young for his leagues, but he's always, produced, he's had good but not great years. And he keeps getting better. So he didn't make our top 100 prospect list, but to me, he would be their next best prospect after Montgomery and Schultz.
Edgar Quero is MLB's 9th-ranked catcher. He falls short of the top 100. Has his stock taken a hit since joining the White Sox in that trade last year with the Angels?
No, but I think his stock might have been overblown the year before. So I think it's more it's recalibrated. So I guess maybe you could say it's taken a hit. But let's say the Angels are rushing prospects, I think, to try to show their owner that prospects are valuable. I'll put it that way, which I don't think is a great strategy. But you just see them do with their draft guys. And Edgar Quero, was the MVP of the California League in 2022. Everybody gets excited about catcher, puts up good offensive numbers. And so what do? Hey, let's put Edgar Quero in AA at age 20. We'll skip him a level. Why? And his year last year, it wasn't great. I mean, I'd say he hit 250 and he slugged 350, and the numbers weren't nearly as impressive as they were the year before. I mean, he should have been in high A, or at least in high A for half a season. And so I don't think his performance last year was truly indicative. He's better than that. I do think the one thing that's kind of recalibrated is, I think one of the hardest things, I mean, even for me, but I'm saying for fans in particular, when they're hearing about prospects, is knowing how good the guy is defensively, how viable. It's just they see guys a catcher, and they're oh man, MVP of the Cal League, and he's a catcher. He's going to be this all-star. And he's an okay catcher. He's not, I hope this won't trigger you. He's not Zach Collins.
That's
who every year you would ask me about, or twice a year you would ask about Zach Collins. And I kept saying, I'm the low guy in Zach Collins. I just think he's the same guy. It was every year it's okay, we're hoping we think Blake Rutherford's power is going to develop. And it's we think Zach Collins is going to get better as a catcher. And he never got better as a catcher, and he never got better as a hitter. He could always throw and walk and hit home runs, but he couldn't make contact or catch. So anyway, Edgar Quero is better than that. But I think he's more he's going to have to work, I think, to be an average catcher. He's a catcher, but he's not a catcher to the point where you're okay, that guy's a starting catcher. You're going to run out there 100 times yet. That needs some work. And I do think there's a little bit of a question on what's the power. Is it 12 homers? Is it 15? Could it be 20? I just think he was put in a tough spot by the Angels. And then it's weird, too, because I think all 30 teams are like this. You don't want to send a guy backwards because that's a slap in the face to a lot of these guys. You have to really do so. Ideally, in an ideal world, once the trade happened, the White Sox could say, hey, let's put you in high A. But then it looks hey, you weren't it looks like a negative. So teams don't do that. So the White Sox kept him in AA. If it were me, and I'm not running the farm system. Paul Yanish doesn't need my advice, but I would send him back to Double A to start the year. Yeah. Why not? But he's a good prospect, but I think people got really excited about him after the Cal League. Like I think the true Edgar Quero is somewhere in between.
I agree with you. Like I would also send him down to Birmingham.
Yeah,
to start the year.
Just let him. Like there's nothing wrong. Like I said, it's hard. It's harder to build up a guy's confidence after it's been damaged. It's hard to do that, and it's easier. Like there's nothing wrong if he goes to Birmingham and just rips it up for a month, then you put him in AAA. Like that's easy. It's easy, and they very well may do that. Now, I don't think they've made any official pronouncements, but I just think that makes sense. And he is one of the better catching prospects in baseball. I just think he's an offensive-minded catcher, and just last year it wasn't fair to him. I think we'd have a better read on him had he spent the year, at least half the year, in high A, rather than, hey, you're the MVP, now you're going to skip a level at age 20. And you're playing the most difficult position when you need work on your defense. It was just not a good move by the Angels.
I know you're a big fan of Jake Eder, and I think he and Nick Nastrini are going to start some games for the White Sox in 2024, especially in the second half of the season if they could stay healthy. Who do you think has the edge in reaching the majors first between Jake Eder and Nick Nastrini?
I think Nastrini does, just because I was going to say Eder was kind of a mess, and maybe that's a little harsh, but Eder didn't pitch well in Birmingham, and he got knocked around the fall league. So I think his stuff, like his velocity started to come back in the fall. It was weird. I think we talked about it after they traded for him. Eder was at Vanderbilt, and he had first round type stuff, but he was inconsistent. So he never really got established in the rotation. He did save the championship game of the 2019 College World Series. He went 3 innings and saved that. And so then, he's a 4th round pick in the pandemic draft, and the Marlins challenged him. They sent him to Double A for his pro debut. It was an interesting choice for a guy who was known for not being super polished. And he was great. It was awesome in 2021. He was pitching just as well as Max Meyer was on that team, number 3 pick in the same draft he was in. And I had one scout who told me, hey, I haven't seen every pitcher in the minor leagues, but Jake Eder's the best pitcher I've seen in the minor leagues this season. But then he blew out his elbow in August, and he had Tommy John, so he missed 22. And then he fractured his foot, so he missed the first, I think, couple months of last year. But right before the trade, he literally had his best start, and he looked like 2021 Jake Eder. And he made the trade. I don't know what happened in Birmingham, where his ERA was 11.57 or something. He just started walking guys, even more so. And then in the fall league, it was the same thing. He had a couple starts where his velocity was all the way back in the fall league. His slider's pretty good. So I think he was just rusty. But I think he's still, because of that, I'd say Nastrini, who has made some strides with his strike throwing. I mean, I don't know that Nastrini's ever going to have average control, but he's 45 control is doable, and he's getting there. But I just think Nastrini doesn't have that rust factor that Eder's dealing with.
More with Jim Callis, including questions from our Patreon supporters, after a quick word from our sponsor.
We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Freedom is all about choices, and while there is only one Jeep brand, you have the freedom to choose from an epic lineup of Jeep brand vehicles. Hit the trails with the versatile classic, the Jeep Gladiator, or experience the wild and style with the sophistication and comfort of the Jeep Grand Cherokee or Jeep Grand Cherokee 4xE. Looking for a more immersive experience? Let nature come to you in the open-air Jeep Wrangler or Jeep Wrangler 4xe, America's best-selling plug-in hybrid. Whatever you choose, adventure is just one drive away. Visit Jeep.com for details. Based on 2022 CYQ4 sales, J.D. Power retail sales data. Jeep is a registered trademark.
We got some questions from our Patreon supporters. As always, thank you guys so much for your continued support. This question from Connor Cody I think is a good one to get started, Jim. When looking at prospect grades, are there any tools that carry more weight for you than others? Any tools that seem to transfer to the big leagues better than others? And I've been getting this question like with the MLB draft, our listeners and readers asking me, have you noticed any trends that carry over from college into professional baseball? And the one is strikeout rate. If you strike out a ton in college, you're going to strike out a ton in the minors, you're going to strike out a ton in the majors if you reach the majors. Like, strikeout rate is very important to me. For you, Jim, with your vast experience, are there any particular tools that you notice that do carry as players go through a farm system and then reach the major?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, from a statistical standpoint, I totally agree with you. I always look at strikeout to walk ratio, 4 hitters and 4 pitchers, because your ability to control the strike zone is going to dictate your success. Now, look, there's guys in the big leagues who have terrible strikeout to walk ratios as hitters, but have big power. Like you can have some success, but generally, like, if you have good stuff and you aren't missing a lot of bats as a pitcher or throwing a lot of strikes, you're going to be limited. Like, you can dream on the stuff, but like, what are you going to do with it? Like, prime example, like this guy's out on my White Sox, Alex Spees, who has like crazy stuff, and he probably has 20 control. So like, ultimately, what is that going to wind up being? But like, it's like 70 stuff. And I'd say for hitters too, like, I look at that because the pitching's going to get better. So if you're not controlling the strike zone well, say in college, like, are you really going to control it when, because I just don't think, like, I remember when Moneyball was all the rage, like, oh, the A's guys are walking and this and that. I don't think you can really teach guys to walk. Like, the A's had these incentives, like whoever had the highest walk rate got like some kind of prize every month. And so what that does is that gets people to take pitches, but that's not necessarily, but taking pitches can be passive rather than disciplined. You can't just, like, I don't think there's a whole lot you could do to a guy to get him to be more disciplined at the plate. You could preach, but like, we've seen it 1,000 times. Like, can you think of an example of a guy who was a wildly or an undisciplined hitter who turned into a really good disciplined hitter? Like, it just doesn't work that way. I think it's innate. But anyway, I'd say for the grades themselves, I think the hit tool is important. Like, we could get all excited about guys' raw power or his athleticism or speed, but if you don't hit, you don't play much in the big leagues. So I think the hit tool is like the most important one to watch. For the pitchers, I don't really think there is one, because I think you need to do more than hit. But the hitting tool is definitely, to me, the most important one as a position player. For the pitchers, it's really everything, because you can have plus control, but if you have fringy stuff or average stuff, there's a limit to what you're really gonna be able to do. And then if you have like really good stuff, but you can't throw strikes, like, there's a limit to what you could do. You're probably more of a reliever and not a high, leverage reliever. And if you don't have health, like, none of that matters. So I don't think there's anything with pitchers you could say, oh, if this guy's got X, then he's got it made. Whereas we see it, and you see the way teams are drafting players, there's guys who their only above average tool is their bat. And it just seems like if you're a scout, if you're a team and you're putting a 60 on the 20 scouting scale or 50 yards, if you put a 60 or better on a guy's bat, that guy's like a top 2-round pick, regardless of the rest of his tools. Like, that's a little extreme. Like, if you had a 5'8" dude with no power and limited defense, well, there's a guy who had questionable power and limited defense, and he still was. I don't want to rip the guy, but like, he was a sandwich pick a couple of years ago, not by the White Sox, but like, so anyway, like, we're seeing the teams are looking at that too. If you can consistently barrel the ball, you're going to probably be a top 2-round pick if a team believes that your bat like that.
Connor, great question. Rock Beats Paper is asking, where are the White Sox falling short of other teams in their use of resources spent on development, whether that's technology, personnel, etc.? Is there anything, like, I know the White Sox, we've been talking about this for so long, Jim, trying to catch up to the best teams in player development. Is there anything that you are hearing when you're talking to other scouts and teams about the White Sox prospects that the White Sox seem to still be dragging behind?
Well, we don't know what every team spends on that. So you can, I don't know that the White Sox are spending X percent of, say, what the Dodgers are the industry leaders, and they have all kinds of financial resources. I guess what I would say is that's something that's really hard to quantify. I do think the arrow is pointing in the right direction. I can't remember if we talked about this, but when Chris Getz got the general manager's job, a lot of White Sox were unhappy because they're White Sox didn't look outside the organization. They didn't even interview anybody. The farm system wasn't necessarily ranked very highly. What are they doing? And I think I told you, I can't remember if we talked about this on the air or off the air, that I thought Chris was getting a bad rap because I've talked to Chris a lot, and I think Chris is a really intelligent guy. When you come in, especially an organization like the White Sox, where loyalty is both a positive and a negative, where you have, they've been doing this same thing for many years. When he came in, not that you would rank this, I mean, the White Sox are probably on the very low end of the spectrum of cutting edginess, for want of a better term. And I do think Chris helped modernize a lot of things, but they were also behind. So it wasn't like they were going to overtake the Dodgers. And I do think if you look at the hires he made, he went outside the organization. He went out. It's not just, and look, the White Sox have good, I'm not knocking what they do, but the White Sox were a very insular organization with Reinsdorf and Kenny Williams and Rick Hahn. I guess Marco Pat, I'm trying to think who the last real significant hire from outside the organization was, for 10 or 15 years. Maybe Marco Patti?
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, the international director. But he went out and he hired Josh Barfield from the Diamondbacks, and they've had a lot of development success. And Josh is really well regarded. Hired Paul Janish, who had played professionally. He was coaching at Rice, but it wasn't like they just, hey, we're just going to promote 6 guys from inside the organization. Brian Bannister, who I think is a really good pitching coach, innovative guy. Brian's basically in charge of the pitching. Again, I don't know how I don't know if I answered the question, but I do think they're getting better. And I do think if I was a White Sox fan, I'm not anyway trying to sound like I'm knocking the people who already work for White Sox, but that Chris went out and sought people from other organizations, differing philosophies, to come make the White Sox better. And I think that was a smart move.
Greg Diamond's asking about 2 White Sox prospects, Peyton Pallette and Tim Elko. What are your thoughts about Pallette as he has another season coming off Tommy John surgery? And when it comes to Elko, I'll add this. Speaking with people who cover Ole Miss sports,
love it.
They are surprised that Elko is still playing professional baseball, quote, because he couldn't hit a slider in college baseball. But Elko still is mashing in the minor leagues.
Wow.
So what are your thoughts about those 2 ex-SEC stars?
Yeah. Well, with Elko, he's interesting. He hit 28 homers last year. He got some AA time. He was 24. I mean, he's not going to make our White Sox top 30, but you keep rolling him out there. And everybody loves his makeup. I mean, everybody knows about him hitting the home run with the torn ACL. He that guy. Ole Miss guys, probably not Jacob Gonzalez either, but I bet Tim Elko has to buy fewer beers when he's in Oxford than Jacob Gonzalez does. That guy's just beloved in Oxford. But he's old. He can only play first. We'll see. He's the kind of guy. He has to prove it every step of the way. I assume he'll be in Birmingham or Charlotte to start the year. And especially when he gets to Charlotte, he'll probably that place is a launching pad. He'll probably hit for some power. And he'll get an opportunity some way, but he's more of a good story, organization favorite. But he's just the fact that he's older, it's tough. I had a scout say, he can hit 92-mile-an-hour fastball, but he can't really hit a fastball harder than that. And he's kind of a DH. So anyway, he's interesting, but he's not a big time prospect. And then Pallette, he came back. It's interesting for him, I think. The curveball came back, the velocity came back. They kept him on tight innings counts coming out from Tommy John. He's kind of champion. He's really competitive. I don't think he threw more than 4 innings or 70 pitches in a start. And I think that he really chafed at that and wanted to do more. So I'll turn him loose this year. From talking to scouts on him, it's not the fastball velocity is back, but it's not great shape to the fastball. So that's something they're going to have to work on, either adding some life or adding more induced vertical break or something. But, I think I call his first year success. Stuff came back. He's going to have to throw more strikes, which was true when they got him out. Even if he hadn't been hurt, that was something at Arkansas. But, he stayed healthy. The stuff came back. I think this year we'll get a good idea. I mean, look, there's such a range of outcomes with pitchers. But I think this year we'll get a better idea of like, hey, can Payne Pallette maybe be a number 3 starter? Or, hey, maybe Payne Pallette's more of like a power 2-inning reliever or something. But I think we'll know more after we see what happens in 2024.
And then Muhammad's got a philosophical question, Jim. With the new CBA rules, what do you guys think is the optimal approach to team building in place of tanking? And this comes on the heels of the White Sox getting on the bad side of luck when it comes to MLB draft lottery. They have the 5th overall pick in 2024, but they can't draft to the top 10 in 2025. So even if they wanted to tank like they did earlier a few years ago during the rebuild where they had back-to-back top 5 picks, they won't be able to do that. So Chris Getz may have to rebuild or retool this on the fly in a different manner than Rick Hahn was afforded. What do you think is the optimal approach in team building to be successful in the major leagues?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I guess I don't mind the draft lottery, but I think it has unintended. I'll be really curious to see what form the draft lottery, if there's changes in the next CBA. Because I get where the players felt like teams were tanking. I don't know that teams were really, tanking, like in the movie Major League or something. Because the guys who are on the team are trying to win. But I'd still suggest that if you believe tanking exists, the teams are still like you're still incentivized to be if you believe in that, as bad as you can. Like, the White Sox are still better off picking 10th and 13th. It doesn't behoove you to, because you just with the draft money. I mean, so I don't know that you really change your strategy. If your strategy is, look, we're not going to be good for a couple of years, and I don't necessarily call it tanking. I'd say more, let's say if I'm looking at 2026 if I'm the White Sox. Like, somebody might call that tanking. Other people, but again, I'm being realistic. I don't think the White Sox really compete realistically before 2026. So if I'm Chris Getz and the White Sox, I'm not changing my plan just because of the draft lottery. There's no incentive for me to go out and give Cody Bellinger $200 million to add to my team so I can win 3 more games and still miss the playoffs. It'll be interesting to see, like I said, because I have no sympathy. I like a lot of the people who work for the A's. I have a lot of respect for the people who work for the A's. But the A's have been kind of killed by the draft lottery. Instead of having a top 5 pick last year, where you had 5 number 1 overall pick type talents, they wound up with the 6th pick. And then this year, I don't have the draft order in front of me. Where are they picking? They had as good odds as anybody to pick 1. They're picking in the top 10 again. So because a smaller revenue franchise, they can't pick in the top 10. They can't win the lottery. They've won the lottery without winning the lottery big. They didn't win the lottery, but they're in the lottery without winning the lottery. So they moved down in 2023. They moved down in 2024. They're going to be terrible this year, Josh. And they can't pick higher than 10th in 2025. So I think actually they're going to be picking ahead of the White Sox. So the White Sox probably can't pick higher than 11th. But you could say what you want about the ownership and what's going on with the move to Vegas. That's not what the draft was designed to do. They're going to get basically dinged 3 years in a row, and that hurts. I mean, that's a huge blow to the A's in rebuilding. The Nationals, I don't think the Nationals were trying to tank so much as they win the World Series. The pandemic restricts their ability to kind of build off the momentum of that, and then things kind of blew up, and they pivoted and traded Juan Soto. But as you remember, the Nationals won the 2024 draft lottery. The first time they ran it, the Nationals got the number 1 pick, but they weren't eligible for the number 1 pick because of the thing the White Sox ran into. So Cleveland got the number 1 pick, and then they picked the number 2 pick, and it was the Nationals again. So they had to throw that out. The Nationals weren't tanking, but instead of having the number 1 pick, the Nationals will pick 10th. I don't think if you're the White Sox, I know this is a rambling answer, you really altered your course. I think you set sight on whatever year you think you're going to contend, and maybe they think it's 25. I'd say 26. whatever the year is. They haven't shared that with me, and you build towards that year. But like I don't see. Like we'll see what happens. Like Kansas City's had a weird offseason. Like I like the Bobby Witt Jr. contract, fine, but like they're bringing in all these like I don't know, like third tier free agents, and it's like, what is that gonna do for the Royals? Like they're gonna win 75 games this year. Like it doesn't really make them bet. I don't think it really changes much. It's more just unfortunate for the White Sox because like I don't think they'll be this bad. Like if the White Sox could lose 115 games this year, and pick 11th.
I guess my perspective, now that Colson Montgomery's a top 10 prospect, if the White Sox have learned from Montgomery and have better success developing younger types of prospects, whether that's prep position players or guys they have signed internationally, maybe that's a direction, Muhammad, that the White Sox should go, is go prep, go younger on the position player side. On the college side, maybe you, or on the pitching side, you stick on the college, unless Noah Schultz does pan out. But there's a lot of prep pitchers that we have talked about over the years, Jim, that have not panned out for the White Sox.
Yeah, I know.
I don't know if we're going to see any of them reach the major league. So it's a great philosophical question, Muhammad. I'm glad that you asked, because I think this is kind of where every team in Major League Baseball is trying to figure out what's the best optimal approach, especially with the new draft lottery.
Hold on one second. I was gonna slightly disagree with you though. I think you run into trouble when you start drafting for demographics. So I would just say, I think they've had some good draft picks in the last couple of years, and I think like their draft last year looks like a lot of really interesting guys. I would be open, like whether it's Colson Montgomery or where do they pick this year? 5th?
Number 5.
They're taking a college bat. We're going to talk about the draft in a second, but like the top of the draft is dominated by college bats. So I think they're going to take a college bat this year. Like you just take the best players available. And I like the way they move their money around. I like their strategy the last 2 years of, hey, in the second round, we're going to take a pitcher who might have been a first round pick, but he got hurt, and we're betting, like Peyton Pallette, I think Grant Taylor has a chance to be pretty good. And then you could kind of like get creative. I like the creativity they've shown. I like the creativity, like, hey, George Wolkoff's still on the board in the 7th round, and he wants to sign. Well, okay, let's figure out a way we can, scrape together $1 million in the 7th round. Like, I don't think that was like planned going into the draft. Hey, we'll take him. I think that was more Wolkoff had a high asking price. It didn't get met. He slid. And at some point, probably the Wolkoff family said to his advisors, he wants to sign. He didn't reclassify to not go pro. And so then, the White Sox got creative and had the money and they paid him. And maybe I'm wrong in that. Maybe that was a plan all along, but I don't necessarily think it was. I think they kind of adapted, and you get like an interesting guy like Matthias Lacombe in the 12th round. I would urge an open mind and continue with the creativity.
Speaking of the draft, the 2024 college baseball season starts on Friday. We'll have our top 100 prospect list on SoxMachine.com ready on Friday morning. Spoiler alert, I also have West Virginia's J.J. Weatherholt, Wake Forest Nick Kurtz, and Oregon State's Travis Bazzana in the top 3, just like everybody else that is covering the MLB draft. But one of the first things that jumped out to me, Jim, was in my top 100, Wake Forest is the number 1 team starting the season. I've got 5 first-round talents on their roster right now. Like 5 guys at the top 30. Kurt, Seaver, Kane, and they're starting pitching. They could have 3 first-rounders this year in Chase Burns, Josh Hartle, and Michael Massey. Yeah. I don't recall a college team being that loaded in draft talent since Oregon State when they had like Adley Rushman and Nick Magical and Trevor Larnach and Stephen Kwan and obviously Ellis.
But they weren't all the same draft either. So yeah, the record for first round picks in a single draft by college is 3, and it's been done 6 or 7 times. And you're right, Wake has a chance to beat that. If you go back and look for sheer talent, I think it's like the 1976 Arizona State team had 2 number 1 overall picks on it, and Floyd Bannister and Bob Horner. And like that might be the most talented roster ever. And obviously it was a different era where there were fewer big time programs and they could hog the talent. But like I think that Arizona State team might have had I'm forgetting, like 12 big leaguers. Like
Wow.
if you go back and look. But yeah, this Wake team, it's a little tricky sometimes figuring it out because you have guys drafted in different years. Because last year's Wake team wasn't bad either. You had 2 first-round picks in Rhett Lauder and Brock Wilkin, and you had Seth Keener who went pretty high, and Sean Sullivan and Camden Minacci, and I'm forgetting somebody else. Obviously Seaver King and Chase Burns weren't on that team last year because they transferred in, but like even on last year's Wake roster might have 5 first-round picks, also just in 2 different drafts. But yeah, Wake is crazy. Well, before you ask me a question, I'm gonna ask you a question.
Sure.
So let's assume everybody's consensus top 3, Weatherholt, Kurtz, Bazzana, and whatever order you have them, are all gone. Like they're all going to be gone. Which not necessarily going to work out that way because things happen once college season's going. But if we assume that those are the consensus top 3 guys and they aren't going to be available right now, as we record this in mid-February, who do you want at number 5, Josh? Who's your dream at number 5?
Well, I keep seeing highlights of Connor Griffin, and I know that you are the White Sox are to take a college bat. Connor Griffin's posted some impressive numbers, at least on the metrics.
3 games,
the showcase.
based on 3 games. But you're right. He would be the one exception. Like the top 2 high school guys are Connor Griffin, PJ Morlando, and PJ Morlando is probably a more advanced hitter, but Connor Griffin is a better athlete. Griffin had a shoulder injury on the showcase circuit, Josh, so he wasn't at his best. And I think people know that, so they aren't holding that against him. But I went 50 hits, 60 power, 65 runs, 65 arms, 60 field. So if there is a high school guy, he would be the guy. So is that who you want? Is that your dream, or you're just enchanted by him right now?
I think
who are you picking right now? You're Mike Shirley, J.J. Weatherholt, Nick Kurtz, Travis Bazzana are all gone. I don't know who picks 4th, but that guy. Okay, Oakland. I'm going to be Eric Kubota. You can be Mike Shirley. Mike, this is Eric. I'm feeling charitable. You tell me who you want, and I won't pick him at 4. You can have whoever you want. So who are you taking? Who's your guy at 5?
Well, you're a Georgia guy. So Charlie Condon is number 5 in my top 100. I have him ranked higher than Connor Griffin, and because I think he's one of the best power bats in the draft class.
He's 4th on our list.
He's number 4 on your list. So what should White Sox fans know about, from your Georgia Bulldogs, Charlie Condon?
Yeah, let's let him go back and have another year. No, I agree with you. It's funny. This gonna sound silly. He's not underrated, but I think he's slightly underrated as a potential top of the draft type of pick because everybody talks about Weatherholt and Kurtz and Bazzana. And I think outside of Nick Kurtz, who I would probably take with the number 1 pick if the draft were today, I think Condon's the best combination of hitting for power and average. I don't think he's quite as good a hitter as J.J. Weatherholt. I don't think he has quite as much power as Nick Kurtz, but I think he's plus in both areas. It's huge raw power that plays pretty much all over the ballpark. Some guys don't get this, but he does. This is what I was telling you before, you can't teach to play discipline. You also can't teach. You could preach this and you hope it sinks in, but there's so many power hitters who have crazy power, who swing for the fences. And you can sit there and be like, you don't have to swing for the fences. Your power will come naturally. But Charlie Condon gets it. Guys have seen him hit the ball, and he's so strong, and his bat speed is so good, and he's 6'6", and he's got leverage that he can hit the ball and still hit home runs. And so he doesn't try to do too much. He keeps his swing reasonably compact for a guy who's that big, really controls the strike zone. I think I wouldn't say he's a plus athlete by any means, but I think he's an underrated athlete who, he played first base last year. I think he can handle the outfield. He's got enough arm strength to even possibly be a right fielder. So I think he gets overshadowed by – so he gets overshadowed. And Kurtz is better, but I think the gap is closer than people think. And this is no knock on the more famous Jack Caglianone. I would take Charlie Condon over Jack Caglianone. The only thing you wish would – not that he's, doesn't have things to tweak. The only thing I would really change significantly about Charlie Condon is you wish he hit left-handed instead of right-handed. But
yeah,
the guys the guys who have big time power and hitting ability. I mean, and I know I said this about Andrew Vaughn, and I still think Andrew Vaughn could be a good big league player. But like that would probably be, I mean, it's funny. That would be my wish, and not because of the Georgia tie that we both went to Georgia. If I was picking fifth for the White Sox today, I would hope Charlie Condon got to me, assuming the top three guys are gone. And I'd be tempted to take him over Travis Bazzana also right now.
How far away is Condon from Wyatt Langford? Because especially for those that watch the College World Series, I mean, Langford had himself a postseason, and I mean, I know we had that conversation, who's the more major league ready bat between Langford and Dylan Cruz, and I think both of them are going to reach the majors pretty soon, but
I've kind of flipped. Yeah. I think the difference between those two guys is Langford's like much more athletic. Like yeah. Condon's probably like a 40 runner and Langford's like a 55 to 60 runner. And yeah, at this point, Langford's done it for 2 years. I mean, it's interesting because Condon redshirted his freshman year at Georgia, and Langford got like 4 at-bats his freshman year at Florida. But, you know, Langford had 2 just tremendous years, and Charlie's done 1. But I think Charlie's a lot bigger. He's 6'6", Langford's 6'1". But, yeah, I mean, Langford's a better prospect and a better athlete. But it's not – I see what you're doing there, and I don't disagree. Like, again, he'd be behind Langford, and you'd have Langford kind of on that tier of guys who could go 1-1, and Charlie would maybe be on the top of the tier of the guys who aren't going to go 1-1, but the next group, same thing. But yeah, I mean, if you're talking about a physical right-handed guy who can hit for power and average, yeah, I'm not saying he's as good as Wyatt Langford, and he's not as athletic as Wyatt Langford, but Charlie's pretty good. Like, you could do worse and take that would be my guy at 5. So is that who you want, or who'd you have 4? I guess. Yeah,
he's going to be. Well, I don't know. He's going to be number 1 on the watch board.
Okay, yeah, that might be the guy. Like Connor Griffin is an interesting one too, because I think I laughed yesterday because I saw somebody tweeted like, oh, he's got 2 homers and he's slugging like 1,100 or something. I don't know what he's slugging after 3 games. I'm like, it's 3 high school games. Like you can't read anything. You can't read anything in the high school stats anyway. But Connor Griffin is crazy tooled up, and like Mississippi high school competition is not the best, so it's not like you're going to see him facing a lot of quality pitching all spring. But if you feel like it's not like Elijah Green, James Wood, hit, swing and miss type of questions that you had, but his shoulder was banged up last year, and he didn't have a great showcase circuit. So that's why I had more of a 50 on his bat. But like if you like it looks better and he's healthier this spring, and you're like, oh man, you know, that guy's a 55 hitter, he definitely will move up the board a little bit more too. I just think with some of these college hitters with track record of performing in the top conferences in the country, teams are going to have a hard time passing up some of those guys for a high school kid. But if you'd do it for the guy who has at least 4+ tools, and you know, if the bat's average to go with 460 to 70 tools, like that's fine. So I think Connor Griffin could move up. Who's your deep sleeper? I'm going to ask you, Quero. Who's your draft sleeper you think you're higher on than anybody else, or you have a really good gut feel about that's not high on lists?
That's a good question. How do you feel about Hagen Smith out of Arkansas?
Yeah, I think there's a scenario where Hagen Smith is the first pitcher drafted. He needs to throw a few more strikes. But I mean, you're talking about, you know, left-handed pitcher who's, you know, 92, 95 to 98 with a funky delivery that creates deception in life, and a wipeout slider that gets righties out. They could turn into a cutter that gets up to 91. And while the split change is not as good as the other pitches, because it's hard to locate a splitter sometimes for strikes, it does have good tumble when it's on. So I do like Hagen Smith, and I do think he's got a chance to be the first pitcher drafted.
Yeah, because like I like Josh Hartle at Wake Forest. Chase Burns, I think, could be up there. But like Burns and Brody Brecht, like it's the big velocity that capture people's attention. And of course that the sliders that they tunnel with that fastball. But like Hagen, the more I watch a film of him, he can control 3 or up to 4 pitches, depending on the start. I just think he's got more to offer than the power righties that are fastball slider that I always have to preface by saying there's high reliever risk with Chase Burns and Brody Brecht. They may not be starters, but if you can harness it, they could be, power starters where Hagen Smith, I'm more confident could be like a mid-rotation starter as a projection.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Well, you can read Jim's excellent work as always on MLB.com. He and Jonathan Mayo also have a podcast that I'm a regular listen, which you can subscribe to the MLB Pipeline podcast at both Apple Music and Spotify. And as always, Jim, this is a blast. Thank you so much for joining the Sox Machine podcast.
Oh, I always enjoy it, Josh. I enjoy it. I'm looking forward to your draft list. So, and since you teased our podcast and we're talking about Wake Forest, I will tease that we will have Seaver King, who fascinates me, the Division II transfer from Wingate, who's one of those 5 first-round picks and probably could play 5 different positions for Wake. We will have him on the next podcast, so people should look out for that next week. And he could play. I could see him if he's as good as he has looked in fall ball. He could play his way into consideration for that number 5 pick.
That'll do it for this episode of the Sox Machine podcast. Thank you so much for listening. As I mentioned in the intro, James Fegan will be making his way down to Arizona in large thanks to our Sox Machine Patreon supporters. We are very close to hitting our first milestone goal in Patreon subscription, so another big thank you to those new to Sox Machine. If you are not a Patreon supporter, you can sign up at patreon.com/SoxMachine. You will receive full access of our work, including when James is on the road covering the White Sox. Additional perks are available, such as a monthly Zoom call with Sox Machine staff, store discounts, ad-free versions of both the podcast and the website, and tickets to our events. Monthly plans start at $5, and you can sign up at patreon.com/SoxMachine. Follow Sox Machine on all the social media platforms and subscribe to the Sox Machine YouTube page for our videos, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music. Leave us a review. We'd love to hear your feedback. Sox Machine Podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com, your home for all things Chicago White Sox baseball. I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.
Asante came to TurboTax after graduating from culinary school and landing a job in the hottest kitchen in town.
My hands are full all day, every day. I love it.
Asante, as your TurboTax expert, I'll make your moves count, guaranteeing 100% accurate filing and your maximum refund. Sound good?
Yes, expert!
Switch to Intuit TurboTax and make your moves count. See guarantee details at turbotax.com/guarantees. Experts only available with TurboTax Live.